All right, folks, welcome again. I'm Kira Kazantzis. I'm the CEO of Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits, pronouns she, her. And we're really excited to see all of your faces and to welcome Sandy. So first, I want to do a few quick housekeeping items before we get started. Zoom closed captioning is available. So if you need closed captioning, see the instructions on the slide for how to enable and disable it. So, and if you have any questions, please go ahead and let us know in the chat, or if you need extra accommodations, last minute accommodations, please let us know. So we have a packed agenda today and we have a lot of people here. So we do ask that folks stay muted and use your chat to share any thoughts during the program. We'll try to monitor those. We're super honored to host this event with our partners, Thrive Alliance and the Center for Excellence in Nonprofits. And together we put this program together because we know how important it is for the nonprofit community to be able to understand the priorities and perspectives of funders who have the power to shape much of our region's landscape. Since Sandy started as the new president of Sobrato Philanthropies just about a year ago, we thought it'd be a great time to have a discussion with her about what she envisions is possible for our sector, region, and world. And all three of our organizations are tenants in Sobrato's nonprofit centers, and we value that collaboration and community building that happens in that context. So these, this is not going to be anything that you all don't know, but these past 18 months have really shown us that we don't really know exactly what's in store for the future of our community, but we do know and we believe that all of us have a role to play in building this future and co-creating our community's future. So that's ultimately what our organizations, SVCN, Thrive, and CEN, hope to do in our work every day, together with our nonprofit community and ecosystem. And we hope this conversation offers a glimpse into how Sobrato Philanthropies can be a partner in this vision. So we asked you in registration to give us questions, and you all submitted great questions, and we're not going to be able to answer them all or to kind of use them all in this context, but we did select many to ask Sandy today. We also know that a lot of folks have questions about processes for Sobrato's grant making and the facilities and some specific issue areas for your organization. And just wanted to let folks know that we do have limited time today. And we want to make sure that the conversation's more forward focused on getting to know Sandy and her vision for what's possible. So we've shared those questions with Sandy and her team, and they've shared some slides with some general overview information for you all. And they're going to drop some links in the chat with more information so that we can kind of speed by some of this, and it's useful for you. And we're also going to share this information with you all via email after the program. So with that, we'd love to know who's in this room with us. So we're going to do a short audience hand raising activity. And the way it's going to work is I'm going to call out a category of nonprofits. And if it applies to you, raise your hand either on your video, or you can use the Zoom raise hand function. And just remember that when that category is done, please lower your hand on Zoom between each category so that we get an accurate idea of who's there. And this is going to help Sandy and our moderators from Thrive and CEN to best know how to gear our answers and our questions. So let's see. First, let's see, do we need to unspotlight me so we can see the hands? Okay, I don't know. All right, here we go. Who here is funded by Sobrato Philanthropies currently or in the past? And please raise your hands. Thank you. And now you can put your hands down. Good luck with that. I know it's technologically challenging because I don't know how to do it. Who is a tenant in the Sobrato Center? Great. Dana, you're spotlighted, just so you know. And then next, we're going to go into areas of work. Raise your hand if your organization focuses on the following areas: health and health related. Thank you. And you can put your hand down. Next, food and or safety net services. Let's see. Okay, cool. And then put your hand down. Housing, homelessness, and affordable housing. And I'm going to move a little quicker now because now you all know how to do this, and so do I. and then hand down, and then next, legal. Wow, this is intense. Okay, and then now hand down, immigration. Okay, and then hand down. Next is employment. Okay, and then next is women or girls services, including domestic violence, help, and support with sexual assault. Okay, and then next is environmental. Wow, look at all you beautiful nonprofit people. And next is ethnic focused services. Next is seniors. And two more, youth and families. Cool. Oh, wow, whole new group of people. Okay, and now whole new group of people, racial justice. Okay. I know many of you signed the nonprofit racial justice pledge, so don't raise your hand just for that, but if you feel like you have a focus on racial justice, we'd like to see your hand up. Awesome. Cool. All right, moving right along. With that, I'd love to introduce the person that you're waiting to hear from, Sandy Herz. And let me move my little thing so I can see what I'm saying. Sandy serves as the president of Sobrato Philanthropies, which you know, where she helps to guide the Sobrato family's individual, collaborative, and collective philanthropy. Prior to joining Sobrato Philanthropies, Sandy was vice president, partnerships and engagement at the Skoll Foundation, where for 16 years she spearheaded flagship partnerships and provided leadership, integration, and alignment across Skoll activities to create broader impact from the work of leading social entrepreneurs. Sandy has held a variety of positions in nonprofit leadership and began her career in corporate finance in New York. And she received a Bachelor of Arts in History and International Relations from Brown University, a Master of Arts in Administration and Policy Analysis from the Stanford School of Education, and a Master of Business Administration from the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Welcome, Sandy, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Kara. Hi, everybody. I am incredibly pleased to be here and be in community with you all. I really want to thank the Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits, Thrive Alliance, and Center for Excellence in Nonprofits for hosting this event. I think, especially in the age of COVID, it's just really important to be able to gather and be in community and have opportunities for exchange. And I'm just really pleased to have the opportunity to be here and grateful to all of you for spending this hour with us. So just to kind of jump in, I think many of you know that Sobrato Philanthropies is at a fairly remarkable inflection point, and was even before COVID. For 25 years, Sobrato Philanthropies has been a family foundation with deep roots in Silicon Valley. We've been in the fortunate position of being able to support many key organizations in our community, including our hosts and many of you here, through grant funding, in-kind office space, as well as our Impact Lab and other resources that we have provided to support the nonprofit community. In 2019, the Sobrato family made an explicit commitment to being more intentional about growing its philanthropy. Not that it had been small before, but to really start to funnel resources more intentionally, more consistently from the business enterprise into philanthropy. And it established an ambitious 6-year growth plan and made a significant commitment to both deepening local giving, so not stepping back from that at all, in fact, growing that, but also starting to tackle global issues of interest to the whole family. And I think it's hard for any of us in this moment not to sort of be conscious of the interconnections between global and local and the way that issues like climate and democracy affect us all. This funding includes what we refer to as collective giving, which where program areas are proactively managed by our staff, as well as the giving of individual family members. So before it was just the programmatic work, now Sobrato Philanthropies really is this platform supporting the family members as individual philanthropists in addition to the staff-driven program work. So there's also the individual work, and then there's also the collaborative work, which is where subsets of family come together around issues of common interest. So you'll hear me or us sometimes talk about individual, collaborative, collective work. That's what we're talking about. Um, Our focus locally is on unleashing human potential through a series of programs designed to ensure everyone in Silicon Valley has the opportunity for a better quality of life. That starts with essential human services, what used to be our general operating support program and renamed. This program ensures everyone has access to food, to shelter, healthcare, and all the basic needs required to stabilize their lives. So meeting people where they are, ensuring that they're going to be okay. Then we have the Pathways to Success program, which supports job training, upskilling programs, small business support programs, entrepreneurship, and financial management to help people improve their economic stability. And finally, we have our post-secondary success program, which is kind of the evolution of the 21st century education work. And that supports young people who are the first in their family to go to college and helps them persist and get a strong first job, statistically ending poverty in that family line forever. So those are the core economic mobility programs and kind of central to our work in Silicon Valley. The other half of our Silicon Valley work is the 4 Sobrato Centers for Nonprofits, which offer in-kind rent and community resources for now 83 nonprofits in Redwood Shores, San Jose, Milpitas, and now Palo Alto. And then regionally, sort of starting locally, but now has become regional, is our English learners work, where we support the Sobrato Early Access Language Program, SEAL, and do also policy and narrative shift work to build the movement toward prioritizing English learners statewide. So supporting teachers and schools to prioritize ELs alongside others. So when COVID hit last year, across all those programs, we had a front row seat to the skyrocketing needs and challenges faced by nonprofits, many of you, as you stepped up to meet it. We watched as demand for essential human services went up 2-3x, as remote learning hit English learners really hard, as jobs disappeared and aspiring college students succumbed to summer melt and never registered because they had family and other priorities that got in the way. We saw how you pivoted, redeployed staff, and displayed really remarkable resiliency in the face of devastating need. We also know how hard it's been to sustain and the need for support for mental health and to address burnout in our own teams and organizations. It's been overwhelming, with many large nonprofits needing to act as network hubs for grassroots organizations and smaller organizations struggling to keep up with this ballooning need. At Sobrato, we pivoted as well. Initially, we provided $2.5 million in COVID relief funds to 90 local nonprofits just in the first 2 months. We minimized application requirements, shifted to more flexible funding, although essential human services has always been general operating support, and we minimized reporting requirements. We also waived all the common area maintenance fees for our tenants. So although the space is rent-free, there's a proportionate share of the common maintenance costs that are paid, and we waived all those and covered all of that for our tenants. So the space would be truly free and not something you'd have to worry about during this time. By the end of 2020, the total funds we deployed across all our programs was 2.5 times the amount we deployed in 2019. And a significant increase over the growth we had anticipated for year 1 of our growth plan. So we thought we would be moving up. We moved up 2.5 times where we were. So in terms of how this time has affected us, sort of that's how COVID affected us. But like you, we were profoundly affected by the murder of George Floyd, the long overdue racial reckoning in our country. And it really put into relief the structural inequity faced by BIPOC communities. We're proud to be part of the Democracy Frontline Fund that was launched by Libra Foundation, the amazing Crystal Haling, and to support local organizations led by people of color. And this year, we made a commitment of additional funds from our strategic reserve to support the California Black Freedom Fund, the We Got Us Fund, focused on Asian American and Pacific Islander communities, and received approval for additional funding for the team to use a racial justice lens on our core programmatic work and do incremental grant making with that lens. I think it's important to sort of acknowledge, I believe that our work over the 25 years has always been supporting communities of color. We just didn't say that was the purpose of it. It was always about economic opportunity and opening doors and removing barriers. And it's a big shift for us and an important one to start to explicitly say, and we're doing this with a racial justice and equity lens. And so in terms of things I'm particularly proud of this year, I'm particularly proud that we are making that shift and getting more explicit about that. And then we've also been on our own DEI journey as an organization. And as an organization, I mean, not just Sobrato Philanthropies, but all of the Sobrato organization, including real estate, capital, enterprise operations, and philanthropy. So the whole enterprise of Sobrato. And we are committed to ensuring we never go back to business as usual. Through all this, we've been exploring global issues of interest to the family because that was a big part of the premise of our growth plan, and we didn't leave that behind. We started with a pilot with oceans and are now looking at climate, which is, as I said earlier, an issue that affects us all, especially with droughts and fires. There's an emerging vision that we have for Sobrato Philanthropies to be uniquely positioned to operate at a scale where we can be both deeply rooted locally and very present locally, informed by community voice, and at the same time be at the table in global conversations and be able to inform those global conversations by what we're seeing locally and take what we understand of what's happening globally and bring it back to inform the work locally. It's not that we are uniquely suited to that. I think there are other foundations that can do it, but there aren't that many. And our deep roots in Silicon Valley mean that we can bring this role that we're playing to bear for our community together. We want to be thoughtful leaders in spaces where we have deeper expertise. So I look forward to using our voice and our presence to galvanize more philanthropy and more in ways that are informed by community voice locally. And then also we also recognize the value of coming in alongside proven leaders in spaces that are new to us, like climate. So we don't think we have all the answers, and we're going to try to be really thoughtful about where we leverage our voice and where we leverage the knowledge and power of others. So in closing, I just want to say, I joined Sobrato Philanthropies just over a year ago. It's crazy that it's been a year already. And COVID was about 6 months in at that point. And I've struggled, honestly, with the challenge of leading this work without having the benefit of spending time in community with all of you. That would have been my first normal step, to open up the office and have everyone come in, to be out in the community and seeing your work. I'm excited to learn more about your work and ensure that voices of lived experience, both yours and those you serve, are informing everything we do. We have a long way to go as an organization, but we're moving forward with great intentionality. And I'm really grateful to all of you, both for the work you do, but also the generosity you've shown me as I've taken up this role during such an unusual time. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for that really thorough and thoughtful introduction. The past 18 months have obviously been so many things. And by the way, I'm Shana from CEN, for the folks who I have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, she, her, Aya. But Sandy, the past 18 months have been so many things. And I was going to go with unprecedented. I heard you describe it in many ways as overwhelming. With so many changes in the sector, as we've been navigating all of the things, the pandemic, shaky political foundations, the racial reckoning, wildfires, you name it. How have you seen the priority of Sobrato Philanthropies change during this time?
Thanks so much, Shana. So given the context of this sort of inflection point moment that we're in, we were already changing. But it's interesting to think about how we change. We're deepening, so we're moving forward in our local work, seeking alignment and integration across our programs. So not just thinking of programs as isolated silos. We're building in voices of lived experience. We're more intentional in our engagement with the family on their philanthropy, which I believe will catalyze even more dollars getting put to work. And tackling the big issues of interest to the whole family. And I imagine we'll talk about this a little bit more later. There's a way that we are working more, the changing environment where we have seen as a result of COVID, the change is possible, that things that we took for granted historically about the way the world operated doesn't have to be that way, that we can deploy trillions of dollars when we need to, that we can shift the way that fundamental systems work. We can shut down the whole economy if we need to. If we can do that, we can shift to address systemic issues that COVID and the racial reckoning have laid bare for us. And so being in this inflection point moment at the same time as sort of the world is in an inflection point creates a lot of opportunity, but it's also a lot of complexity. And so we are very much sort of evolving into that complexity and embracing it, but hoping that we can use it as a moment to drive real transformative change and not just incremental change.
To that point, you're speaking about opportunity and complexity. Past year and a half have highlighted some growing priority needs in our communities, right? Like around mental health or environmental justice, youth education, youth and education, frankly. The arts come up in my mind also. We saw how many different types of organizations we had here today on this call. I'm curious, given all of these different sectors with needs, what excites you about the ways that we can lean into those opportunities?
So I think one of the ways that change has really manifested over the last year is a much broader recognition of just how interconnected all the issues facing our community are. So you used to be able to say, well, I'm focused on homelessness, I'm focused on hunger, I'm focused on mental health. And in fact, it's all interconnected. And we always knew that at some level, but there was sort of an ability to bring an intellectual lens to it and say, well, we're just going to focus on this one piece. For us, the place where all those pieces come together is the Essential Human Services program, because COVID has made it really clear that you can't focus on just one part. All these pieces come together in the lives of individuals and families in our communities. And the other place where it comes together is the Sobrato nonprofit centers, which house a much broader range of types of organizations than the programmatic areas that we fund through grants, although there's a substantial overlap. So I think there's really an opportunity now to think in a more integrated way than we necessarily were able to in the past. So it's clear that there are health affects that health affects economic well-being and education, that environment impacts health and the economy. So one of the things I'm most excited about is being able to lean into, now that we're starting to build our core team, the strategy for how we think about the integrated approach for Silicon Valley across both economic mobility and the centers, and then more broadly across the different ways that we work. And as many of you probably realize and heard, because we were saying it to everyone as loudly as we could, we are really excited to have Camille Llanos Fontanilla joining as our Vice President of Silicon Valley Programs. Camille, for those of you who may not be familiar with her, was the former executive director of Somos Mayfair and an incredible leader in the San Jose community, and well known to many folks, but really deeply embedded, trusted member of the community. and being able to bring her in, and she is with us here today, to be able to bring her into this work is really important for how we do this and do it well. Because I don't have those deep roots in the community, I didn't want to try and do something immediately when I started and then have the right leader with the deeper roots coming in and saying, no, it should have been done completely differently. So really excited for Camille's leadership and for the opportunity to dig into this more.
We do a little sub follow-up question there, like maybe take a minute, you don't have to go too deep. But, given this new view that you have that's more interconnected, and Camille, to the team, is that going to affect how Sobrato will invest moving forward, given these new priorities that have sort of risen to the top?
We have no specific plans at this point. What I anticipate is we're going to start to be thinking about sort of what are the gaps or opportunities, where is there opportunity for more synergy, where we can invest in the intersection, and deepen our existing strategies rather than completely reinvent and focus in a different direction. I think one of the things I really appreciate about Sobrato is that we have partners that we've been funding for 20 years. We don't sort of fund for a few years and then say, okay, now we need to do something different and sort of reinvent to keep it fresh for everybody. That we are longtime partners, and we don't anticipate changing that.
Thank you. And Camille, you're getting a ton of love in the comments. So you're being championed there. Congrats on the new role. My next question will move us more into what a lot of people refer to as the DEI space: diversity, equity, inclusion. At CEN, we call it IDEAL: inclusion, equity, access, inclusion, diversity, equity, access, and liberation. We got a question right up this alley from Mariah Uro-Belio. And the question was, how will your organization ensure a focus on the most disenfranchised communities among us and put racial justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, liberation, all of those things at the front of the mission? So that's kind of like up in the ante even a little bit farther.
Yeah, so I think one of the most important lessons of the past year has been this more explicit and deeper understanding of the interconnected inequities at the heart of our society and our structures, and the recognition that it doesn't have to be that way. As I said before, if we can shut down the whole economy, we can do all kinds of things that we didn't think were possible before. And if that's true, we must do them. Whatever excuse was blocking us previously no longer holds water. And so we have taken concrete steps with the Democracy Frontline Fund, with the Strategic Reserve Funds this year on the funding side, and also with diversifying our leadership, most recently with Camille and also with Jose Quinones joining our board of directors. So that's a good start, but we have a lot more to do. So in terms of our internal journey, and again, not just Sobrato Philanthropies, but all of the Sobrato organization, we have partnered with Promise 54 and are developing our belief statement, understanding the strengths and opportunities we have as an organization, because I think it has to start from within and build out from there. And from within, it starts with each of us individually, and then it builds out to organizational beliefs and then out into how we manifest in the community. So I came to this role with a profound sense of responsibility, that to come on as a leader who is white and privileged of an organization like this in the summer of 2020, the stakes are even higher. Sort of, I must do everything I can, and we want to do it right. So we want to do it in a thoughtful way. We want to do it in a process where we are engaging all the stakeholders and ensuring that we are prioritizing voices of lived experience, and at the same time bringing the family along with us so that it is deeply rooted and moving forward in a way that will stand the test of time.
So that's really exciting to hear that you individually find it important and it goes from you throughout the organization. I think so many times we have these worries about whether we can really show up in that way as organizations. So it's great to see you all really taking that responsibility and role very seriously. So I wanted to shout that out. I'm going to pass the mic now to Georgia. Thank you, Sandy.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And for those of you that don't know, I'm Georgia Fruch. I'm the Executive Director of Thrive, which is the Alliance of Nonprofits for San Mateo County. Excited to be here with you, Sandy, and with my colleagues over at SVCN and CEN. I'm going to switch gears a little bit to talk about nonprofit space, which I think is your nonprofit centers are a really tangible example of the work that you do. They're a physical example. I think so many of us in Silicon Valley benefit, whether we're tenants or whether we're attending events pre-pandemic days, we really benefit from the community that is generated at the nonprofit centers. You also know that for many of us, it's a privilege to be tenants, and there is often a lot of kind of interest and curiosity about things like, how are tenants selected? What is the community like? And I'm sure you have your own vision for that. So we wanted to set aside just a few minutes to talk about space, also kind of, even if it's not your area of expertise, kind of the future of work as things are evolving. We have a particular question we received from Cheryl Munoz Bergman from the Immigration Institute of the Bay Area. And it is really around the vision for the Sobrato Nonprofit Centers and your recent opening of the Palo Alto location, which kind of coincided again with the pandemic. So that must have brought on some really interesting challenges and kind of that notion of what are your plans for the future and how are you thinking about selecting and prioritizing for the future?
Great. So great question. And as you say, a complicated one in the age of COVID. Not just because the centers have essentially been closed for all intents and purposes during that time, but also because we're not at all convinced that the nonprofit space needs are going to be the same afterwards. And I don't think at this point, even many of the nonprofits in the centers or really employers across the Bay Area and around the world know exactly how this is going to settle out in the end, because we don't know the trajectory of COVID. But the vision for the centers, from my perspective, is to create vibrant hubs for the nonprofit community, facilitating connections, learning, and effectiveness in complex times. So there's a real-time ability to come together, to learn from each other, to share ideas, to refer stakeholders and clients, and for there to and almost like an early detection system for sort of what's happening in the space. What are you feeling now that if we were just grant makers, we wouldn't know what was happening until sort of the next time we had a quarterly conversation or we asked somebody to take the time to submit a report. And so there's a power both for the organizations in the centers and a power for us as a philanthropy to have this symbiosis of the grant making and the centers and the ways in which they can inform each other. Under Camille's leadership, I'm anticipating a more explicit integration of our Silicon Valley strategy. So how are the centers informing and supporting the work of the grant making? How are the grants supporting? And overall, how is this advancing the broader agenda, again, grounded in partnership with community and what you all are telling us you need? We're excited to have completed the selection process for Bayshore. So we now have 83 total tenants, and we can just pop up the slide that shows who the new 10 Bayshore tenants are. For those who haven't heard, we're about to announce that in our newsletter. and you can see the center there on the left. And it is right along 101 on Bayshore in Palo Alto before you get to the if you're going south on 101 before you get to San Antonio. We're going to continue to stay true to what's working and supporting local nonprofits. I think that there's the larger sort of question around the future of work is an important one. We're toward that end, rather than sort of making decisions or trying to project at this point, we've made the decision not to fill the current vacancies beyond filling Bayshore. So we probably have another 10 or so open suites that we'd rather keep open for now, although we realize that means that they can't be in use at the moment, but it gives us the flexibility now with Camille here to think, what is the best way to use those? Are organizations going to start realizing they actually need less core space and more flexible space? So maybe there's a pooled hot desk area that all the organizations in the center can sort of draw on, and they need less of a footprint, and maybe we could fit more organizations in if that's true. Sort of what we need to talk to the tenants, we need to understand how the thinking is evolving, and just want to maintain some flexibility for the moment to ensure that we can move forward coming out of COVID in a way that is going to truly meet the needs and be the best use of the space.
That's really helpful. And it sounds like you're really willing to be kind of in conversation with tenants and possibly the larger community about some of these challenges. So that's really exciting. I do think that, it's one of those things that investing in nonprofits and their infrastructure is sometimes kind of underrated. So that I know that there are many of us who really just want to kind of echo and reinforce the fact that these centers are really valuable, not just for tenants, but also for the community that they serve. So really appreciate that, and also the slides that you were able to provide. So I'm going to pass it over now back to Shayna.
So again, I'm going to pivot a little bit and talk about capacity building. So we got a question from Steve Sullivan of the Housing Industry Foundation. And the question was, and I guess I'll give a little bit of context. There's so many ways to define capacity building. Let's start there, right? And direct funding is welcome. All of us love it, preferably unrestricted, right? But there are many other needs. Georgia just talked about space, other ways of offering support. So the question was, what level of partnership and collaboration do you envision Sobrato seeking in developing with grantees that support their infrastructure and their capacity? And the follow-up was, how can the foundation help facilitate nonprofit philanthropic partnerships across the Bay? And if you need me to repeat it later, I will.
Yeah, no, these are, again, great questions. We are working on an update to our mission that will reflect the fact that we are deeply committed to Silicon Valley, but also working beyond Silicon Valley. And the phrase that everybody loves that is sort of embedded in there is the sort of in partnership with community. We will do these things. Like nothing that we're going to do is going to be coming sort of from outside. And I think in selecting Camille to run this work in Silicon Valley, that was very much sort of present in our mind, and I can't imagine that she would do it any other way. So the exact way that rolls out, it's hard for me to say. I can say that starting with the spring, we've instituted a practice of having grantee roundtables. They're on Zoom at the moment. Hopefully they'll be in person soon, limiting it to 30 people so that we can have a real conversation and hear what's going on with our grantees and what ideas they have for us, and share sort of our current thinking. So that's an existing mechanism. And I'm really grateful to everybody who came to the first one, and we have another one coming up in a few weeks. So I hope as many folks who are Sobrato grantees who can will participate in those. I am deeply committed and have been for sort of in my previous incarnations prior to Sobrato as well, of the importance of voices of lived experience. It's important to me that we bring those voices on in the right way. So I didn't want to move quickly and not do it in the right way, but some mechanism, whether it's an advisory board or other ways that we can bring those voices into our work, I think is going to be something that I'm really looking for and have been talking about very consistently with the board and with the team. And then just being able to leverage the centers as community hubs and places where we can do convenings and have more in-person connection and conversation once it's safe to do that again.
Sandy, you've got some interest in the chat there. A couple of questions about how do folks get invited to do the roundtables?
So the roundtables are for our grantees. And so, and particularly at this point, we focused on Silicon Valley grantees, both tenants and cash grantees. So there should be an email that goes out that basically says first come, first serve. Please sign up. If you're worried that you're not on the list and you want to make sure you're on the list, send an email to grants@sobrato.org and just let us know, and we'll make sure that you're among the contacts who are listed. But I'm hopeful that it will be fairly automatic, and that once we get rolling on these and things are not quite so sort of crazy busy the way that they have been, that this will happen regularly enough that everybody has a chance to slot in. It won't be viewed as a scarce resource.
Fantastic. And one other quick point. I know I got one more quick one. So I'm not sure that I heard you go into the nonprofit philanthropic partnerships maybe beyond just affecting.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. So my entire career, honestly, has been built on establishing partnerships that sort of go beyond the obvious. So, early on in my career, I was developing corporate partnerships for employment for people with disabilities. When I was running a technology center, I was developing partnerships with venture capital firms and technology companies and other nonprofits, much the same way that you all are collaborating on this event to ensure that their success in the broadest possible reach. And then I was, Vice President of Partnerships and Engagement at Skoll, and developed out the partnership practice there, which was sort of an unusual practice at the time for foundations. There's now an association of people who do that, but when I started, it wasn't sort of an understood concept. So I am all about the broader partnerships, and in particular see opportunities for us to be very intentional about how we use our voice and our leadership to signal, this is what we stand for, this is how we do this work, this is the way in which it's grounded in community, and this is why this is smart philanthropy. It's not the only smart philanthropy, but this is a form of smart philanthropy, effective philanthropy. And others who are coming into the space, who are unsure how to go, who want to fast track, can kind of slot in with us and help to amplify the strategies that we're doing. We did that very successfully in Skoll, and Skoll still does that very successfully. And it was one of the things that jumped out at me with the opportunity to work with Sobrato, is that is an underutilized opportunity for us here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I'm going to pass the mic now to Petra Sultan.
Hi, I'm Petra Sultan. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Education for Thrive, and that's what my questions are going to be about. So we are clearly in a unique moment in time, as you've mentioned several times, about what's going on with social justice movements, including Black Lives Matter, and nonprofits have really been galvanized by this. And they're really thinking about how they can create and sustain advocacy and systematic change. And so what do you see as philanthropy's role, and of course, specifically the Sobrato Foundation in supporting the advocacy work that can really bring about some of the systemic change?
A couple of thoughts on that. One is, as I said earlier, we've always been supporting through our work communities of color, but not intentionally saying we are doing this to support communities of color. We're doing it didn't take into account the structural issues. So there's an evolution for the family and the board to go through to sort of embrace that shift in thinking and to be willing to become more explicit about that. As we're in that evolution, I think the most important thing we can do is to signal to others that it's okay to make the shift, to others who look at us and think, this isn't maybe the way that they had conceived of their philanthropy, but look, Sobrato is shifting, and it's okay, we can shift too. And so we have looked at opportunities to sort of slot in alongside, say, in the California Black Freedom Fund or Democracy Frontline Fund or the We Got Us Fund, not as leaders who are defining how those should be structured or trying to shape the policy and the change, but as significant supporting actors who can step up and say, we want to lead in coming in behind those who have the lived experience and have the deepest expertise. So for us, that's where we are at this point. The larger question of sort of leveraging policy to create systemic change. This is an area that historically wasn't a focus for Sobrato Philanthropy. And more recently, we've had a lot of success with the English Learners Program, leveraging, having a policy and narrative shift program designed to galvanize more dollars, more support, changes in educational priorities and so on. And I kind of think of this a bit like a skunk works for our philanthropy, that it's proving out the possibilities for the family and the board of how this can lead to significant change, that these are not soft dollars and you never know what happens, but actually look what is happening as a result of this. And this is a moment in time where more influence is possible, that the very entrenched beliefs are loosening, and there's the opportunity to make shifts. So I'm hopeful that sort of as we are on this journey, we're moving through from not having been as active in the policy and racial justice space explicitly to being present, to then being in a position and having the track record to be able to be more active.
That's really exciting. We think it's terrific that you're doing that shift, because there's oftentimes when doing not just the philanthropy but the policy together really helps. So my second question is really about it's about the environment, but with the current fires, the floods, the hurricanes, everybody knows what's going on like today. Climate is really on our minds.
Yeah.
And what is Sobrato's plan to work with this? And locally we have a lot of environmental justice issues as well as kind of the larger climate change issues. So we'd love to hear what your plans are in that direction as well.
Sure. So I think we're all seeing it and feeling it. It's in the air we're trying to breathe. It's in the fires and the drought and everything, the hurricanes, everything that we're seeing around the world. And the good news is that I think the Sobrato family was seeing that as well. And so when I did my initial sort of walk around with the family, meet with everybody, get to know them when I first started, one of the things I probed for is sort of, what are you most interested in personally, separate from the collective work of the philanthropy, so that I can be sure to support you with that. And almost universally, climate was an area of interest. So it has emerged as kind of our first area of focus. The family had done a pilot sustainability initiative focused on oceans that is now 2 years in and is going well. But I think climate change and responding to climate change in ways that both is grounded in partnering with communities, is leveraged in terms of the timeliness of the intervention and the impact, the extent of the impact, the degree to which this is perhaps an underinvested space where our dollars can make a bigger difference. These are the kinds of screens that we're using in figuring out where exactly we want to engage for the maximum impact and alignment with the family. And so that process is underway. In a few weeks, we'll be making a recommendation to the family and the board on how we recommend proceeding, which will probably be initially over the next 3 years. So that is underway. At the moment, that is happening at sort of much more of a global level than thinking about, therefore, what does that mean locally? I think as we establish sort of the global presence of this issue in our work, we'll then be able to start to think about, okay, so what are the through lines from global to local and vice versa, and how do those play back and forth? And that's, I think, where there's a lot of potential, and I'm particularly excited. There's sort of the synergies of the sort of global and local and informing each other. And then there's also, how does this play out as a priority for all of the Sobrato organization? How does it affect the way that we invest our funds or think about building our buildings? And how does this become a consistent through line across our philanthropy, sort of in all those, or across our enterprise in all those directions?
My follow-up question was going to be about Sobrato itself, as far as what their environmental footprint is, and if you're addressing it. It sounded like you guys are starting to.
Yeah, so there have been a lot of active conversations this year, starting at the beginning of the year, to explicitly look at what the possibilities are. We're flexible on the philanthropy side. There are lots of ways we could go and how we think about climate investing. But for real estate, it would be a real switch to think about how to incorporate climate into the work. On the capital side, decarbonizing an investment portfolio is starting to become sort of a known strategy. And there are mechanisms for doing that and for understanding where the carbon impact is the greatest and how to reduce your exposure in those areas. And so overall, both parts, as we have been building out kind of what's our impact-oriented philanthropic strategy, they've been thinking about what are the ways in which they can reduce the carbon footprint, improve how green the buildings are, the materials that are used in building the buildings, and make the whole enterprise more consistent with the goal of sort of moving towards greater and greater carbon reduction overall.
Thank you. I will hand it back to Kira.
All right, well, okay. So we have like 2 extra minutes, so I thought we could take an audience question. And so I've asked a couple folks in the audience if they could submit some questions in the chat. And we do have a couple, but we probably have only time for one. Here's just a really easy one, Sandy. It's how do you see Sobrato in the next 3 years to 5 years? Maybe you can tie this into your, someone asked me that right now about my organization, I would just like pass out. So maybe you can incorporate that in your closing remarks, since we're just about at the exact time we want to be.
Sure. So, what I hope you take away from this is a number of things. That Sobrato Philanthropies is at a really important inflection point organizationally. We don't have all the answers. We can't spell out for you exactly what this is going to look like or what it means, but you have a really important voice and role to play in how we think about this. And we are in a position, because of the family's renewed commitment to philanthropy and increasing the funds available for that purpose, to really be creative and be thoughtful about how we do this. And then this moment sort of in our society and this critical juncture, this decade in which so much will get decided. There are times sort of in my past work in philanthropy where I felt like we were working so hard to drive transformational change, but the inertia just was not going to let us move. I don't feel like there's the same inertia now. It's there, there's no question. The resistance is absolutely there, but there's so much more openness to change and recognition that old systems were not working for anyone truly. So when I think about the next 3 to 5 years, it's about sort of learning and growing together in partnership. I may wear a funding hat and you may wear a nonprofit hat, but I've worn nonprofit hats in the past and probably will again. And some of you will probably wear philanthropy hats in the future. Like we are in this together. we each have our role to play and our dynamics to manage and our people to represent and need to make it all work. But we are in this together. That is the way that we will define how Sobrato Philanthropies will evolve. I'm grateful for opportunities to be like this, to be with you all and to hear what matters most. I'm grateful for the engagement of our grantees at the roundtables and them sort of sharing with each other and with us. And I hope I can come back in a year if you'll have me, and we can talk about sort of what progress we've made and what we haven't, and get more feedback and continue the conversation. So thank you very much.
Just adding a quick thanks on behalf of Thrive's SVCN and CEN to you, Sandy, and to your team. We look forward to working with you, with Camille, in the hopefully in person soon. I also wanted to take a quick moment to thank the planning team led by Donna Elneal and Marissa Martinez over at Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits, Kira for your leadership, our partners at CEN. This has been a really collaborative effort. I think it's been fun as a result and very dynamic. And also to all of you audience members, thank you for your questions and your engagement. And you will be receiving an email with a couple of upcoming opportunities. At the end of September, you have an opportunity to engage with Center for Excellence Nonprofits Ideal Training Program. And in October, early October, SVCN and Thrive Alliance, along with Sacred Heart Community Service, are going to be co-hosting our first Nonprofit Racial Justice Summit from October 4th to 6th. And you will be getting information about that as well. So thank you all for the wonderful time together, and we look forward to seeing you virtually and in person also soon. Take care.